In this video, I'm going to show you how to install your MC4 connectors onto your solar panel DC cable. I'll show you step by step. By the end of the video, you'll know how to do it yourself. You'll save yourself a lot of time and money, and you'll learn a little bit about wiring and your solar panels. Now I'm going to give you two tips right off the bat that are very important. One is when you strip off the insulation on your wire, go 3/4 of an inch. Not quite 1 inch, but somewhere between 3/4 of an inch and 7/8 of an inch. Don't do 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch. Make it about 3/4 of an inch long. Second thing, use 10 gauge wire. Do not cheap out and use 12 gauge wire. Me personally, I like to use red and black so that when I'm combining a bunch of strings into a combiner box, I know that all my reds are my positives. A lot of people just use black for both, but you're going to have to tape something on the end of one so you can distinct one from the other. I just prefer red and black, and definitely recommend 10 gauge thick, 3/4 of an inch, strip off your insulation. Tools you need to do this job: you don't have to have these MC4 connector tools. These are just basically a multi-solar tool. They're very helpful to have when you're going to disconnect and reconnect your panels, but you don't have to have these to put these MC4 connectors on the wire. You are going to need some wire strippers to strip that insulation off. Now don't use, this one goes to 10 gauge, but if you have some cheap ones, they're probably only going to go to 12 gauge. Now don't use those. If you don't have 10 gauge strippers, then use a razor knife, box cutter, whatever you want to call it. And then you're going to go in about 3/4 of an inch and just rotate this razor blade around very gently until you get it all the way around, and then pull off the insulation. Now you don't have to have a crimp tool, but it does make it easier and a little more professional. Now if you don't have one, which most people don't, and I'll put a link in the description below on how to buy one off Amazon, a full kit, show up at your doorstep in 1 to 2 days. If you don't want to buy that kit, you can use needle nose pliers, a pair of pliers, or a pair of vice grips, and I'll show you that next. Alright, so here's how we're going to connect our MC4 connectors to our solar panel cable wire. Now this is a male connector. Now male connectors are normally positive. Just double check your solar panel. And you have a female connector here, and it is negative. Now here's where it gets a little bit confusing. If you'll see these two connectors right here, this inner diameter is much bigger than this one. So this bigger inner diameter is going to be a male, and this one is going to be a female. Before I get started, when I'm making my connectors, I'll usually set them all separately. Just make sure you have your male connector here. It's going to have the larger inner diameter. I put all these to one side. I got my female with the smaller diameter. I put those off to one side just to avoid confusion. Alright, so we're going to install the female connector first. So just give your wire a little twist to kind of keep them all in place. And insert right up to the insulation. So if you have a solar panel crimp tool, like most people don't, you can easily use this to crimp your connector onto the wire. Otherwise, most everyone has wire strippers like this, or they have vice grips. And what you can do, you're going to hold it in place, and you're going to fold that around like that, and fold the other one on top of it, squeeze, and make a good solid connection. So most people are not going to have this tool at home, so I will put a link in the description on how to buy a full kit off Amazon and do this completely correctly. But if all you have are vice grips or pliers at home, you're just going to squeeze this down, and then we're going to install the connector. Buy a bag of these connectors. They're going to be just partially screwed together. Go ahead and unscrew these. Now these are ones off Amazon. These are one of the easier ones to install. You're just going to go ahead and slide the cap over your wire. And now you're going to push the connector onto the wire, and you're going to push down until it clicks in place. A slight tug, make sure it's not going anywhere. And now you're going to thread these together, and you can pretty much get them as tight as they need to be by hand. But if you have two of these, this is what this center slot is for. You can hold that like that. You can slide this over here like this, and this gives you a little more leverage to actually tighten this up very tight. We have our female end completed. positive end or the male end, it's basically just the same. Insert. If you have the crimp tool, go ahead and use that. That's going to be your best tool. But if not, vice grips, pliers, something to squeeze this around, layer this on top of each other. Squeeze it as hard as you can, give it a little tug, make sure it's going to stay in place. If you don't have a crimp tool, you can see I just folded these two flaps over each other and squeezed. So now unthread your positive connector. Slide over onto the wire. And this one is also going to click into place. So I'll bring it up close so hopefully you guys can hear the click. And now thread together. Like I said earlier, you can get these as tight as they need to be just by hand. But if you want to get them just a hair tighter, you can also use these for leverage. And that's all there is to it. This is just a basic extension wire. But you're going to be doing the same thing if you need to add wire running into a combiner box, or if you just want to add another string that's a little bit farther away, you'll need to make some extenders. But that's how you put your MC4 connectors onto wire.